Hello, I am Emily Frank, joined by Elizabeth Kelly. We both work at LOUIS, the Louisiana Library Network, our state's academic library consortium. LOUIS is based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Baton Rouge is the traditional ancestral homeland of Indigenous peoples and communities native to this region, including the Chitimacha, Atakapa, Caddo, Choctaw, Homa, Natchez, and Tunica people. Today, you'll hear about our work on an open textbook pilot grant from the U.S. Department of Education, the approach we used to develop OER, evaluation methods applied to this project, and possible practices you could apply as you evaluate your OER projects. I want to acknowledge that while this work was funded by the U.S. Department of Education, the contents of this presentation do not reflect their policy or an endorsement. Our grant is called Interactive OER for Dual Enrollment. Dual enrollment, also called dual credit or concurrent enrollment, being where a high schooler takes a college course and receives both high school and college credit. In this project, we worked with colleagues from around Louisiana to develop OER for 25 dual enrollment courses. Our course selection was based on factors including enrollment, drop, fail, withdrawal rates, and equity gaps between white and non-white students. Each course had one cohort made up of up to 5 teaching faculty and 1 academic librarian working on creating OER. Their task was to develop a textbook and a course shell for that course under an open license, and to design the material with the needs of diverse learners and institutional contexts in mind. Cohort members were from 2- and 4-year institutions, both public and private, and because participants were located around the state, they collaborated remotely using online meeting, collaborating writing, and project management tools. We first recruited our cohort leaders, the academic librarians. We did a train the trainer with them focused on OER, accessibility, licensing, and the publishing skills needed to undertake this work. And then after recruiting the teaching faculty, the librarian cohort leaders led this training with their cohorts. We, with that experience and the information that they had from that initial training, we then moved into the course development phase. The focus here was on collaborative open publishing, working on an open textbook and the corresponding course. As the 25 cohorts adapted and created OER, they were asked to create inclusive materials reflective of students in Louisiana and to ensure these course materials were accessible for learners. Cohorts routinely met virtually to delegate work, share progress, and troubleshoot issues. There was ongoing cohort training as well, and I'll share more about that in a moment. And at the end of this phase, we had some review structures, including a teacher review, since these were dual enrollment courses, and a Quality Matters review. Quality Matters being an assessment mechanism for improving the online and blended course experience for students. I mentioned we had additional training and support. This was from the Rebus community and their textbook success program. Rebus facilitators built capacity and community and brought OER publishing expertise to this work. We paired cohorts with other cohorts in this training, so there was cross-pollination in the meetings. Facilitators were also available not only in but outside of meetings, including in a discussion forum. And then the final phase of this project was the course piloting phase. In this, cohort members had the opportunity to teach with these materials, running an OER version of a class at a Louisiana institution. They reported feedback from this experience and asked students to share feedback as well. So those were the phases of our project, and now we're going to look at the evaluation across these phases. For this first phase, we ran a pre-test and post-test with the librarians and with the teaching faculty at the start and at the end of the training using a surveying tool called Qualtrics. We also had librarian cohort leaders submit monthly reports detailing progress, accomplishments, and challenges, and this was also in Qualtrics.
All right, thanks, Emily. So I'm going to dig a little bit into some of the results that we have for these. So for the pre and post test, cohort participants completed a self-efficacy pretest using a 0 to 100 scale, where 0 meant cannot do at all, and 100 meant highly certain they could do. Then to gauge their self-perceived abilities in areas spanning open education practices. The survey was administered upon initiation and conclusion of the professional development phase from May 2021 and then in August 2021 via Qualtrics. Responses were anonymous, and librarians and teaching faculty received different surveys. All of the questions increased in perceived self-efficacy, with 5 of the 18 questions having a 12-point or more increase. So some highlights for the faculty were a 19% increase in finding people and resources to assist in authoring and editing new OER, an 18% increase in finding people and resources to assist in copyright and licensing challenges, an 18% increase in accessibility evaluation, 14% increase in release time advocacy for OER development, and a 12% increase in finding people and resources to assist in OER searching and evaluating. Then for librarians, we saw a 49% increase in supporting OER resource management and preservation, and a 39% increase in providing OER metadata. So we also had a monthly report that the librarians completed using Qualtrics, asking them to report on a number of tasks and milestones, the number of tasks and milestones that they hit that month, lessons that they learned, tasks and goals that they planned for next month, and roadblocks or challenges that their cohort was facing. They also reported on this survey how many cohort meetings they had held that month and who had attended the meetings. These monthly check-ins were especially useful to Emily for knowing what was going on in a particular cohort and opened up opportunities for further discussion if a cohort leader was struggling. While the survey does lend itself to some quantitative analysis, the real purpose of this assessment was to allow for regular temperature checks.
So as we moved into the second phase, the course development phase, we continued requiring a monthly report in Qualtrics from the cohort leaders, the academic librarians. As I mentioned, we had additional training here from Rebus with their textbook success program, and they had surveys throughout their program. And there were the two review approaches. These both used rubrics.
So, as Emily just mentioned, our partners Rebus held training sessions for the librarian cohort leaders and for the faculty in small subject-based groups. And then Rebus provided us a quarterly report with some high-level takeaways from these sessions. They also conducted polls during these training sessions to take the temperature of participants about their goals, how they were feeling about a particular topic or skill, and to start conversation. Rebus conducted an end-of-program survey to summarize the participants' final impressions. Lewis staff also participated in Rebus's textbook success program training with other OER project leaders from other states, and Rebus conducted surveys throughout this program to gauge its effectiveness and inform its direction. Finally, Rebus also worked with a consultant, EdBridge, to assess the TSB program overall with a DEI lens, looking at the Lewis cohorts and cohorts from Massachusetts as a case study. Caitlin Schilling and Apurva Ashok will be presenting on this during this conference on November 7th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. So for the course reviews, this project objective sought to provide course design and review structure that ensures accessibility of the content through application of the Quality Matters or QM review process. This review process was applied using QM certified trained reviewers who are capable of completing the review and applying this QM certified endorsement. The review process also used the QM review model and rubric. All 25 courses received QM review by trained reviewers, received a completed rubric and report, and a consultation regarding that rubric with the review team, and as needed, completed amendments to the courses. The review process did not provide the official QM endorsement as represented by the QM stamp or certification because the QM higher education rubric includes required fields where adopting institution-specific details must be provided. Instead, the review was deposited in the Moodle courses for future adopters to use and hopefully expedite QM review at their own institutions. The teacher review was coordinated by our partners at ISKME to use K-12 and dual enrollment instructors to review the courses for their subject matter. The courses were reviewed using a rubric developed by ISKME, and again, the final reports from this review were provided to the cohort to make changes to their course, and the report was included in the Moodle course for future adopters.
And then for the final phase, that course implementation or piloting phase, students received a Google form survey asking for their feedback. Participating teaching faculty were required to submit a survey, also in Google Forms. And finally, we leveraged some existing infrastructure in terms of data at the campus and state level to help us further assess impacts.
The faculty who piloted with the materials were required to fill out a Google Form survey for each semester that they piloted. We've only just started to look at high-level conclusions from this, but here are some overall perceptions. 95% of faculty reported that using the materials had either a positive or neutral impact on their instruction, with cost savings, customization, timely updates, accessibility, increased student engagement, improved learning, positive student feedback, flexibility, quick access, innovation, and positive financial impact all being mentioned as positive outcomes. Areas that were noted as negative outcomes included quality concerns, confusion from students, and challenges with the technology. We'll be diving into these results more in the coming months to inform our upcoming OER projects. Students in piloted classes were also invited to fill out a Google Form survey. This is also just a high-level overview so far, but we did have over or almost 800 students respond, so we do have a fairly robust data set to work with. Questions for the students ranged from student awareness of the free and open quality of the materials to their use and perceptions of the materials to questions about their typical textbook purchasing processes. 86% of the students were aware that the materials were freely available online. Less than a third of the students printed the materials out. A whopping 98% thought that the materials were equivalent to or better than the materials used in their other courses. And 91% were either somewhat likely or likely to register for a future course with open materials. So when we wrote this grant proposal, we used data from the Louisiana Statewide Student Profiling System, or SSPS, to identify which courses we wanted to include in the grant and to set a baseline for the outcomes we wanted to achieve. We were aided in this by recent legislation in Louisiana, Act 125, which requires open and affordable courses to be marked as such in the student registration systems. Now that the courses are being piloted, we're returning to the SSPS data to begin measuring these outcomes. The dashboard shown here is our initial proof of concept for conveying the success of these outcomes. It does not yet include all of the piloted courses, but you can see here for Outcome 2, minority student participation in the selected courses, that we're measuring the percentage participation of Black, Hispanic, White, and other student participation in these courses. While the charts shown here do not specifically get to the meat of that outcome, which is increasing the number of Black and Hispanic students participating in dual enrollment courses, this does let us see if the ratio of white to minority students is changing in these classes. Outcome 3 aims to decrease the letter grades D and F and also withdrawals from these courses. This we are able to measure, and we're seeing positive progress in this direction already with the limited number of pilot classes that are included so far. Louisiana Act 125, which requires that open and affordable courses be marked in the student registration system, also requires that the public post-secondary institutions in Louisiana submit their required textbooks to us. We're able to use this information to calculate the savings for students enrolling in the pilot courses. As of this summer, students in the piloted courses are estimated to have saved over $114,000 on course materials for these classes.
We want to conclude with a chance for you to think about methods you might apply to your own OER evaluation if or as appropriate. To help that thinking, I'm going to show how we were informed by the work of others. So if you're doing any type of training or professional development, a pre and post test is a relatively straightforward way to evaluate learning across that period by asking the same questions and assessing the change. Our pre and post tests used a 100-point scale and were self-perception based questions. These were based on the research on this slide. For our course review, both Quality Matters and the teacher review used rubrics. Using a rubric to review materials allows you to specifically target areas for feedback. The teacher review rubric leveraged multiple openly licensed materials and existing rubrics. Those are all listed here and should be something you could find if you paused the slide and searched these titles. Finally, if you want feedback about OER materials being used in the classroom, faculty and student surveys can give you both quantitative and qualitative feedback. Our surveys were largely focused on perceptions, which is part of the Open Education Group's COOP framework. The COOP framework emphasizes the 4 areas considered most important in OER research: cost, like financial savings; outcomes, like course grades; usage, like how much a resource is read; and perceptions, like how students and faculty perceive the OER quality. Checking out the COOP framework can give ideas of perception-related questions you might use in your surveys. Finally, you can find the courses we talked about today and the associated textbook titles here. I hope that gives you a sense of our work and methods being applied to assess our work, and ways you might translate our approach to your OER efforts. Thanks for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions.